been waiting all week for that Saturday show. Tune in, see what happened, let your troubles go. Work real hard, now it's time to take it slow. Kick back and relax with that Saturday show.
Good morning, Albuquerque. Welcome back to another episode of That Saturday Show, brought to you by the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice, your voice in the struggle for social justice and saving democracy. I'm Jim Harvey, your host, and we have another great show for you today, featuring more discussion about the proposed stadium, election updates, another school shooting in the fascist state of Texas. Didn't they just pass a law saying that anybody and everybody can own and carry a gun? And we'll talk about a few other things as well. Some quick announcements for today. The Peace and Justice Center annual yard sale begins today at noon in our parking lot at 202 Harvard Southeast. Furnishings, home goods, appliances, clothing, and a lot more. Save the date, December 11th, the Center's annual gala. You want to be a participant in that as well. This year's theme, Evolution, and the program will be packed with great music, history, and riveting interviews. And let us not forget, once more, about our upcoming high-stakes election on November 2nd. And all of you need to be at the polls because, yes, it is high stakes. But first, let me get this off my chest. Providing you with a little background for openers, we all know that when it comes to city government leadership, finding a black face in leadership in this city is a difficult task. Okay, in the police department, we have Superintendent Stanley, and that's about it. Next in line is the mayor's liaison to the African American community, Nicole Rogers, the wonderful Nicole Rogers. And despite her being buried in the Office of Equity, Diversion, and Inclusion, which I might add is not directed by an African American, Nicole is doing a great job reaching out to marginalized communities, individuals, to bring black folks together with knowledge and opportunities about resources. Now, here's where it gets ugly and hypocritical. You may have heard me mention Reverend David Walker, but frankly, I'm growing weary of this huckster in a preacher's robe. Walker recently led a delegation of black ministers to meet with the mayor and to complain that Nicole does not represent the black community and that she doesn't even belong to a church here, as if that's important. And, to make matters worse, claim that she wasn't doing anything. Well, Reverend Walker, and anyone who's dumb enough to follow him, my message is plain and direct. First, who needs your church? There are an estimated 50 black churches in Albuquerque, some with as many as 5 members. I don't see you doing anything for the community, Reverend Walker. I can count on one hand the number of black churches that are actively engaged in helping the community. I look at the challenges represented in the fight against COVID, and you are absent from that fight. People are losing their homes daily, and you are absent from that fight. People are hungry, and how many of you are feeding people? Just a handful. Police brutality rages on, and when I look in your direction, you are very quiet. What is most disturbing for me, however, is that when we need to press the city government for black leadership in meaningful positions of influence and authority, you are silent and absent from those discussions. Instead, you want to falsely assail the one individual in a position of working to bring us together and make knowledge and resources available that will help us improve. Instead of you reaching out to help Nicole Rogers, you won't even answer her phone calls. Instead of lifting her up, you are trying to push her out. Do you want her job? Stop it, David Walker. Stop your falsehoods. And stop being an embarrassment to the African American community.
And welcome to Good News News. I'm your correspondent, Hassani Olujimi, and I'm Gugu for Good News. The goal of this segment is to inspire and uplift you, the viewer, with nothing but good news. Let's jump right in. Today we have two stories from our good friends at somethinggood.com. First, let's hear something good about a little boy named Charlie and his big helper. Let's take a look, shall we?
8-year-old Charlie, like most boys his age, loves video games, moving players with quick flicks of the controller. But look closer, and you'll see Charlie is at a bit of a disadvantage. He was born in Haiti with no hands and no legs. The story goes his mother hid him until he could be brought to the United States at 5 months old. He now lives near Splinter. Special circumstances require special help, and 2 years ago, Charlie received Dukesy, a service dog from St. Francis Service Dogs, raised and trained in Roanoke.
It was an ecstatic thing for us because we knew that it was going to help Charlie to become more independent.
But he still needs a bit of assistance, and that's what he gets from Dukesy.
They do everything that a normal kid and a dog do, except she is specifically trained to help him with different things.
She opens the bathroom door, picks up his pencil, opens the refrigerator, and helps him pull his shirt over his head when he runs out of reach.
It blows your mind, the things these dogs can do and the things that they think of. Sometimes you don't even have to tell her. She'll see that he's having trouble with something and she'll step right in. I don't know how to explain it. It's a bond that they have.
Vanessa says Dukesy knows Charlie is her boy, and Charlie certainly knows Dukesy is a bit of help to get him where he needs to be these days and beyond.
And everything that we do, we try to teach him to be as independent as possible so that when he is grown, he can be out on his own and he can go to college and take care of himself.
How much do you love Dukesy?
Very much, with my whole heart.
Isn't that good news? What do dogs do when they take a bathroom break during a movie? They hit the pause button. I said it and I meant it. Well, we just witnessed an animal helping a human. Now, let's learn about humans helping animals. Let's take a look, shall we?
Anyone who works with horses as much as Kay Garland has will tell you there's something magic about them.
Well, I love horses. Let's put it that way. They've given me so much in life.
That's what brought her here to volunteer at the Roanoke Valley Horse Rescue in Hardy 3 years ago.
You find out real quick, these are rescues.
Fry is among the many. He came in skin and bones after his owner died. RVHR gave him a second chance.
You're gonna make me cry. But they come and they have that look in their eye, and they're so beaten down, you know, and for us to be able to take that horse and put the light back in his eye, that means the world.
Each nurtured back to hopefully a happy ending.
The goal is to rehabilitate them and readopt them and find them a forever home.
Now, isn't that good news? A horse walks into a bar and the bartender says, "Hey," and the horse replies back, "Yes, please." Well, ladies and gentlemen, she's back. Little Big Mama, what do you have in store for us today, lady?
Thank you, Hassani. Happy birthday, baby. Isn't it amazing that your birthday now has become a serious fire hazard due to all those candles? And isn't it a great feeling knowing you're so old that there's nothing left to learn the hard way? But seriously, baby, before I go, I just want to say happy birthday again and congratulations on being able to cough, fart, sneeze, and pee at the same time. Bye, baby. Many more. Bye.
Well, little Big Mama, I heard that you're so old, your social security number is 3. The best way to turn a frown upside down is to get Goo for good news. I'm your correspondent, Hassani Olujimi, featuring little Big Mama, of course. Can't get rid of her. See you next time right here on That Saturday Show with more good news.
Welcome back to That Saturday Show. I'm Jim Harvey, your host, and we are pleased to bring to you today founder and host of Alternative Radio, and that would be none other than Mr. David Barsamian, coming to us from Boulder, Colorado. And proudly to say that Alternative Radio is one of our PAJOLA members. PAJOLA, in case you forgot your lessons from weeks gone by, Peace and Justice Organizations Linking Arms. David is with us today, and Alternative Radio reaches Canada, Europe, South Africa, Australia. It's available through podcast as well. And David has an incredible history. I'm going to give him a chance to just tell us a lot about that. But one of the things that stands out for me is work that he's done with another one of my heroes, and that's Noam Chomsky. And hopefully we get him to talk about what that's like as well. But without further ado, let me welcome David Barsamian to That Saturday Show. David, glad that you're with us today.
Thank you so much.
So, Alternative Radio. How long ago did you start Alternative Radio? And tell us about some of the experiences you've had along that journey.
Well, it was kind of almost by accident. I moved to Boulder, Colorado in 1978. I have no background in the media, although I've always been interested in politics and in history. I moved to Boulder in 1978, and just at that same moment, KGNU, which is our local community radio station, went on the air. So since I didn't have a job and I had no, I didn't have any opportunities to do any kind of work, I thought, let me propose a program to this new radio station, which I did. It was called Ganges to the Nile. It was about the music and culture and politics and history of all of those countries, from the river Ganges in India to the river Nile in Egypt. My parents are from that part of the world, the Middle East. We're Armenian. I studied and lived in India for many years, so I had that connection. I knew a little bit about all kinds of different musics from that geographical area. Iranian music, Afghan music, Indian, Pakistani, of course, and Arab music as well. So I began the program locally, and I discovered that I had really found something I enjoyed doing and felt authentic doing. I think that's really important to stress. That, it felt real to me, and I could do it and do it well. And so gradually, more and more people were asking me, these are the days of cassettes. Now, I know you're too young to remember cassettes, but they were a recording device, small piece of tape that you put in machines. No one can possibly know what that is today. So more and more people were asking me for cassettes of the programs. And it occurred to me, well, if there's this interest among KGNU listeners, maybe there's interest across the country and outside the U.S. as well. So I began alternative radio literally in 1986 with a huge broadcast of Noam Chomsky, something like 2.5 hours or 3.5 hours of Chomsky in one go. See, no one had told me that stations like to get 30-minute and 60-minute programs, not to have such a long amount of time. So it was a learning experience, but some big stations picked up Chomsky. And that was the beginning of alternative radio. And today we're on about 300 stations across the United States. Of course, my favorite station is right there in Albuquerque, KUMN, where we air on Saturday evenings from 6 to 7. And we're all over the state of New Mexico, actually, from Gallup in the north, to Las Cruces in the south, Taos, Santa Fe, Albuquerque, I just mentioned. So it's a strong connection I have with New Mexico, and I've been there many, many times, have spoken in Albuquerque and Taos and Santa Fe, Española, and other places throughout New Mexico. We're also airing in Australia, Britain, all across Canada, and some other countries as well. The program is 1 hour in length. It's free of charge to all public stations. We depend totally on listener contributions. And we offer MP3s and PDFs and written transcripts free of charge. We want to get the information out to as large an audience as possible. And so it's been quite an extraordinary journey for me over these years, and to be associated with such giants as Howard Zinn and Edward Said, both of whom are no longer with us, but whose work continues to inform and inspire me. The great Arundhati Roy of India, Vandana Shiva of India, Tariq Ali of Pakistan, Nadir Hashemi of Iran and via Canada, Ervant Abrahamian, Iran via Armenia, Anasha Nazarian of Armenia. Lots of different countries, different voices have made this tapestry of sound, of dissident, challenging mainstream media assumptions that are embedded in their ideas and never really are unpacked. I think that's really an important thing that we need to be media literate. We have to understand how the media function and how its ideological framework informs virtually everything it does. So just for an example, the US has the right to intervene in any country in the world on any pretext. That is an embedded assumption. Now, there'll be discussions. Well, should they invade Iraq? Should they invade Iran? Should they bomb Afghanistan? And then some, the doves will say, no, shouldn't bomb Afghanistan. They've suffered enough. And then the hawks will say, no, we should send a whole, division of troops there and occupy the country once again and teach those Afghans a lesson. So to get away from those embedded ideas, it's important to have information about what's really going on and whose power is being served, who profits from the military-industrial complex, of which, incidentally, Colorado and New Mexico are intrinsic parts of. We have major bases in both states, as well as lots of, Northrop Grumman Air Force bases, troops. Fort Carson in Colorado is one of the biggest military bases in all of the United States. So we have, I think, a special obligation in this part of the country to not just speak truth to power, but to speak truth to the people. The people need to have the information to go forward so they understand that they're not being hornswoggled. That's a term I learned when I moved to Colorado. Growing up in New York, I never heard hornswoggled. But, to get befuddled and bewildered by the corporate media and all of its embedded assumptions. It's time to break from that and to create a reality-based, fact-based media that's not floating in the stars with lots of self-congratulations and self-adulation about how great we are and how wonderful we are. And, we just want to help people around the world. The reality is the United States of America, our country, is an imperialist power. Absolutely. It uses its military as muscle to force other countries to do their bidding. That's the reality of our country. Do we want to change it? I certainly do. And I think that's something the Peace and Justice Center in Albuquerque is working toward. We need to have an equitable society that is non-racist, that is not misogynist, that embraces all shades and colors of the rainbow, and is based on being decent with other countries and not bossing them around like a corner bully would. So basically, that's what I have to say.
That's a lot. You know, you were talking about all the bases here in New Mexico, for example, and you know, I want to remind viewers that we don't want to lose sight of the fact that Los Alamos is still here, Sandia is still here, and those are the homes of nuclear weaponry. And Los Alamos is being retrofitted right now to begin to develop a whole new class of nuclear weapons, which I might add is a violation of international law. But the United States is going along with it anyway, and it's on our radar, and we're working with organizations like Vets for Peace to make certain that people here know what's going on. And that's what I think you had to use the term hornswoggled. That's that's hornswoggling here in New Mexico, you know, and we just want to make certain that people know what's happening regarding that as well. So David, like I said, I'm just fascinated particularly by your work with Noam Chomsky. He's another one of my heroes, and I've read several of his books, and I've seen your name pop up, and I just wanted to ask you, you know, what was it like? What's it like to work with such a brilliant man?
It's awe-inspiring.
Yes.
And I can't say enough about Noam. I'll use his first name. He doesn't like people calling him Professor Chomsky. He's very, you know, he's not at all pretentious.
No, he's not.
Even though he happens to be one of the greatest geniuses that this country has ever produced, or the planet has produced. He's extraordinarily humble and kind, and I must emphasize patience. Very patient with people who don't know as much as he does, and he doesn't lord it over people that, you know, you don't know anything, you're much less than I do. None of these, you know, ivory tower pretensions of superiority. So he really practices what he preaches in terms of equality. And, you know, I tell this story of, you know, once I was in his office, and there were a couple of junior high school students there writing an article about him for the local junior high school newspaper. Meanwhile, out in the hallway is some Nobel laureate who's waiting to talk to Chomsky. But Chomsky gave, you know, these two kids his full attention and the full amount of time. There was none of this, well, you better get out of here. I got a very important person waiting for me. And it's much more, you know, I've got to see him right away, so get lost. Not that at all. Very patient, very kind. He's very soft-spoken. I've rarely heard him use his, you know, raise his voice. But underneath all of that is simply a razor-sharp intellect with an enormous command of information and facts and figures. Now, a lot of us, you know, read a lot, and, you know, we pull different things from different sources. But I think part of what Noam is about is that he has this enormous talent of synergy, of bringing things together, to collate them, to filter them, and then to present them in a very synergistic and powerful way. And, you know, he's, as I said, his voice is very soft-spoken, but you hear the power of his intellect of analysis. And there's no BS. There's no, coulda, shoulda, woulda. There isn't the insertion of opinion for fact. It's fact-driven. It's based on research. And he brings that research, brings it together for all of us to understand how the U.S. functions internationally, how it functions domestically. What is the role of the business class? What is the role of the media? What are elites up to? How are they befuddling and bewildering what they call the herd, the common herd, the ordinary people who don't understand anything? You see this in the whole idea of how consent is manufactured to support policies that are actually against the interests of the people. Prescription drugs is a perfect example. Across the board, in great numbers, people want affordable drugs. The United States is unique, I believe, in the world in that taxpayers fund the research to develop the drugs through these CDCs, there's 4 of them, and direct subsidies to Pfizer and Merck and Eli Lilly and these other gigantic pharmaceutical corporations. We pay for their research. That research is privatized by them, and then they sell the drugs back to us at scandalous prices.
That's double dipping.
Yeah, I think this is totally unacceptable. And I think, healthcare is an area where the United States, you always hear we've got the best, medical care in the world. Let me qualify that. The best medical care, if you can afford it in the world. We pay through the nose, and that has got to stop. Healthcare is a human right. It is not something to be privatized and to be made enormous profits from, just as affordable housing is a human right. Franklin D. Roosevelt, in his 1944 State of the Union address, which no one cites except Chomsky and maybe a few other people, and I'm doing it right now, FDR said that affordable housing is a right that every single American should enjoy, not a commodity where the prices keep going up and up. Rents are sky high. Home prices have gone through the roof. It's become more and more difficult for people to put, food on the table because, so much money is going toward rent or paying off mortgages. So there's, there's area after area where people want certain services and they don't get them because of the corporate stranglehold on the political system. How does that stranglehold manifest itself? Through money, through direct lobbying, through greasing the skids, to paying off, high executives to do their bidding. And so that, that whole system needs to be, thrown overboard. And it should go right to the bottom of Davy Jones's locker at the bottom of the sea. I'm speaking there in Albuquerque, right on the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic Ocean, I'm sure, is right nearby, right? Hardly.
Yeah, right. Right.
So, here we have
that strange country down below us called Texas.
Right. So, and then we have, of course, we've alluded to the military-industrial complex, which sucks out not just huge amounts of money, but sucks out the generosity and kindness and love and affection that we should have for the rest of humankind. You mentioned the big labs in Sandia and Los Alamos. They are death factories. They are creating weapons of mass destruction for which we, quickly go to war if any other country tries to develop weapons of mass destruction. And this group, there's a wonderful group in New Mexico, Los Alamos Study Group, LASG, that does a lot of good research on what's going on at these labs. So we have a lot of work to do, and I'm really glad that the Peace and Justice Center is there to bring people together, that, because that's an important thing as well, to overcome isolation. One of the ways power controls us is to create differences, to divide and rule. And so people don't feel a sense of solidarity, that they have some kinship with their fellow citizens. So overcoming isolation is a very, very important thing. And, solidarity, we've got to have more solidarity, and we've got to, come together to fight for the issues that are most important to us: healthcare, affordable housing, affordable minimum wage, a livable wage, not just the minimum wage. I mean, the minimum wage is $7.25. That's insane. You cannot live. You cannot put pretzels on the table. You cannot put used potato chips on the table, earning $7.25. So, studies have shown that at least $21, $22, $23 an hour would be a bare minimum for people to be earning, so that they can live decently. Meanwhile, we have got plenty of money for aircraft carriers, for F-35s, for B-1 bombers, for B-2 bombers, for Trident submarines, for a new generation of submarines, for the modernization of nuclear weapons. Are you kidding? We should be demobilizing and bringing down our nuclear weapons toward eliminating them entirely. These are weapons that cannot be used. These are doomsday weapons. So that, we've got to reprioritize our budgetary concerns and move toward human needs, not the needs of corporations and the military, industrial, media, banking complex.
I say all the time that the only thing that stands between the will of the people and our elected officials is the almighty dollar. And elected officials find it so easy to ignore the will of the people in exchange for making certain that their coffers continue to be full. And that just goes right on up the ladder in terms of where the money goes, how the military industrial complex feeds off of just more money for the beast, more money to feed the beast as it moves around the world. And no matter what we say, that gets ignored, because we need to begin to find a way to be a lot more effective in making certain that our voices are heard, and that our voices are not only heard, but that we're listened to and we are obeyed. Because elected officials, build that firewall between themselves and the rest of us, using money, and it's just got to stop, and we've got to find ways to make it stop.
It's going to come through citizen action. It's
That's right.
going to come from below. It's not going to come from the top. The elites are not going to, wake up tomorrow morning and say, hey, you know what? This system is totally unbalanced. There's too much inequality. We have to address these issues. That's not going to happen. It's never happened in history. All positive social change has always come from the bottom up. You feel the pressure. We have an example of what happened post George Floyd murder, where people came together and demanded something that's called police reform, although I'm not exactly sure what that is. Police should holster their weapons rather than drawing them, and weapons should be used only as a super last resort, not as something that's immediately to be deployed. So, we have examples throughout history where movements have really changed the way things happen and changed the quality of a society. And, as bad as things are, there have been some improvements in race relations, in equality, in overcoming homophobia, and all kinds of other very mean-spirited tendencies that were very, very prevalent. The way we address Native Americans and the sordid history of destruction of the Native Americans. There is now more and more an accounting, a reckoning of that history. And that's very important, and we need to push that forward. You know, in terms of the military bases, the U.S. has something like 800 around the world. China, you know how many military bases China has around the world? One. That's one, as in a single digit I'm holding up. One in Djibouti. And the U.S. has 800. If today the U.S. closed, I would dare say 400 of those bases, 50%, it wouldn't cause a blip. It wouldn't threaten our national security at all. These are power projections to control other countries and their resources. That's why we have bases. But the cover is, it's about freedom, it's about democracy, it's about women's rights, it's about humanitarian rights, etc.
You know, as we wind down this discussion, there is something that stood out for me when I was reading an article about you a few weeks ago, where you had said that not having a degree is an advantage, and if I paraphrase correctly, said because it helps you unlearn propaganda. And that said so much more for me. Unlearning propaganda is such a valuable tool to have, the ability to be able to do that, because we're bombarded with it every day, you know, through the media, you know, the subtleties of film and television, and the direct hard hits that you get from places like Fox News and Q News and Sinclair Broadcasting, and you know, the garbage that is heaped upon, you know, everyday citizens, that has people doing crazy stuff like January 6th, which I might add is the day we recorded our first TV show. But just unlearning the propaganda is such a challenge all by itself. I wanted to know if you wanted to speak a little bit more to that.
For sure. You know, I derive a lot of inspiration from great thinkers like Frantz Fanon, Aimé Césaire, Amilcar Cabral, Walter Rodney of Guyana, and many other titans on whose shoulders, you know, I am barely, you know, approaching. But to decolonize the mind, we're living in a system of propaganda where the economy is driven in a certain capitalistic direction to which we are to all subscribe, and not to allow the countervailing ideas and narratives to break into that, so that we can have a more equitable society. So how to deprogram the mind, how to get beyond propaganda. First of all, you have to understand what is being said. And so when I said I was kind of lucky that I, you know, only went to one, the only blemish on my resume is the 1 year I went to college, was I didn't have to unlearn things because I had never really bought into the system. I was able to self-educate myself, you know, and guided by some of these people that I just mentioned, Iqbal Ahmed of Pakistan as well, a great thinker and innovator and anti-imperialist, you know, breaking through the vocabulary of oppression and creating, you know, possibilities for social and political change. I mean, that is the big challenge, you know, getting beyond where we are to a place we want to be. How is that affected? And again, it comes through solidarity. It comes from finding common ground. Now, I dare say, I know this may come as a shock to you, we probably don't agree on 100% of everything. There'll be areas of disagreement. But I want to embrace you. I want to find that common ground. Housing is your issue. Healthcare is your issue. Great. Let's focus on those things. And then building on that, rather than, oh, you know, this guy, you know, he's a real loser. He's kind of a quasi-Republican, and he's got some weird ideas about gender and race and class. I want to steer clear of this guy.
Yeah.
See, we're getting beyond that and finding the common ground. That's the important thing. And to, moving forward based on that, based on dignity and respect. I may not like some of the things you stand for, but I respect your opinions, and I want that we should have a dignified connection rather than one built on abuse and derision and false sense of superiority, etc.
We've certainly got a lot of that out here. And we've got about a minute left, David, and I just wanted to just end this with a question that stands out for me, and I like to ask when I'm talking with real thinkers, and you are truly a real thinker, and that is, how would you measure threats this country is facing today, juxtaposed the nation's impact on world affairs? And one of the things that stands out for me is there was recently, and I'm still researching this, some law passed in the United Kingdom that specifically targets Black people there. I'm trying to get more information about that because I'm trying to ask some of my friends over there to weigh in on it. But when you look at all of that, how would you measure then the threats this country is facing today?
Well, I take my cue from the current Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, who should be sitting on the Supreme Court, incidentally, but thanks to the outlandish, outrageous behavior of Mitch McConnell and the gang of troglodytes in the Republican Party who blocked his nomination. Instead, we have Amy Coney Barrett sitting in that seat, and two others that Trump appointed. But what did Merrick Garland say recently? The greatest threat to U.S. security is the rise of white supremacist groups, and that is something that has been percolating for quite some time, that was allowed to be fully flourishing under the 45th president, whose name I will not mention, and culminating in January 6th. But these are groups like the Proud Boys and others. They're heavily armed. They're fanatical jingoist nationalists. They're racist. And they do pose, I think, the greatest threat to the United States today. I'm not that worried about external threats to the U.S. And that's something we have to pay attention to. So I think that's an area that, we need to be very mindful of. There are these groups in Colorado, for example, in New Mexico. It's not just, Mississippi or South Carolina or Idaho but right in our areas, in our neighborhoods, there are white supremacists, and they are emboldened to demonstrate and to, deploy their weapons and to show off their would-be power. All of this is, of course, draped in pseudo-nationalism, wrapping themselves in the American flag. So that's an area I'm very concerned with. It's not just Timothy McVeigh in 1995 blowing up the Oklahoma City building, killing something like 170 people. There are many, many Timothy McVeighs out there who are also being trained in weaponry and bomb manufacturing via the internet, where there's very little control over that kind of information. And so it's something we have to be alert to.
I completely agree with you on that. I really do. And if time permitted and if format permitted, I could have one of those Noam Chomsky experiences with you and do 2.5 hours. But we're going to have to come back again and pick up these conversations because there's so much more that we could talk about here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And can I give my website so people can connect with me?
You're way ahead of me. Go right ahead.
All right. It's Alternative Radio, one word, alternativeradio.org, alternativeradio.org. Or if you'd like to talk to me, we have a toll-free number. Just give me a call, 1-800-444-1977.
We'll be sure to put those up on the screen when this show airs as well. And remind our local folks here that you can listen to Alternative Radio on Thursdays on KUNM.
Saturdays.
On Saturdays on KUNM right here in Albuquerque. What time is that again here?
6 to 7 in the evening.
6 to 7 p.m. You've got nothing better to do that would get in the way of you getting some important wisdom. David Barsamian, thank you ever so much for taking this time, and we're going to invite you back again so we can keep this going.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Takes his trouble to his car. Man takes his car into the street. Man takes the street into the freeway. Man gets on the freeway. Man gets real confused. Man thinks his car's flat. Man stops, gets out, and gets a turn. Man steps out in center lane. Middle of the night in the gentle rain. The charter bus takes him out.
We're back at That Saturday Show. And of course, if you've been paying any attention to the news or watching the shameless ads on television, people are already stumping for more gentrification, for more displacement, for more homelessness. Oh yeah, you say, oh, can't possibly be, but it is, because that's what a new soccer stadium would actually bring to Albuquerque: more misery. And you, as the citizens, would be paying for it. So back with us to talk about this and talk about the actions that we are planning across this city is the incredible Bex Hampton. Thank you back again.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so let's go forward with this, because we know we've got a press conference coming up. We know that we've got a demonstration coming up. You know, we've got stuff happening. Talk to me.
Sure. There's a lot of upcoming things to get involved with. On Wednesday, October 13th, we are going to be hosting a press conference. Address is to be announced, but it's going to be on the porch of an older retired couple in Baralas on their doorstep. We're going to have a lot of different speakers and organizations. It'll be at 11 a.m. We'll have signs and a banner. So, the messaging is very clear to stop the stadium. And then from now until November 1st, every weekend from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., we're going to be knocking on doors, asking people what they think about the stadium, getting them to fill out papers that say why they're voting no, why they're going to attend the rally November 1st. And that's one of the big things that we are trying to build is a rally, because of course we want people to vote no, but we really want to put the nail in the coffin. We want to mass mobilize and show that we're not going to let this stadium happen in Albuquerque. We're going to fight back against gentrification. There's tons of studies that show that stadiums raise rent. And so we know when they say it won't raise rent, that it's a lie. We know this project from the jump. It's not about the people. It's not the people's stadium. Like Peter Trevisiani spent $100,000 on to get people who are workers to say that they support it. But, if Peter Trevisiani cared about the people, if the city cared about the people, then it'd be people first, housing first, healthcare first, and so many other things, not the stadium. So we need as many people in Albuquerque as possible, all progressive people, all people who want to stand on the side of justice, on the side of the working class, to come out and join the rally November 1st, 5 p.m. at 4th and Baralas. There's a nice little triangle park, and it's going to be a really amazing rally.
Wonderful. We're looking forward to that because the Peace and Justice Center is going to be right there as part of this important action. And, one of the things that I think I mentioned this when we were talking last week, that just stands out for me is the TV ad, which is so deceptive. They talk about, we won't be raising your taxes. No, we're not going to be raising taxes. Okay, that may be true, but guess what? You know what a bond is? A bond is authorization to use monies that are in the city's coffers, monies that come into the city's coffers, to guarantee a loan to build this stadium. That means that money that could and should be used for things like housing for people who need housing, more rental assistance for people who are going to need that, more healthcare services, and I could go on and on, improving the dreadful Albuquerque public school system. I can go on and on and on with money that could be used where it's needed, not for another sport for the elite in this town that in 2 or 3 years might be standing empty because the soccer team would decide, we've had enough, we didn't get enough support, we're going to go someplace else. And we'd be stuck with an empty and useless soccer stadium and $50 to $70 million that could be spent wisely on the people of this city. So that's deception. So when you hear that, when you see that ad on TV or when you hear that announcement on the radio, don't fall for it, folks. It ain't true. The money is coming out of the city's coffers, and the city's coffers are comprised of money that comes from your tax dollars. So it's not real. It's just not real. We need to get out there and make our voices heard. We need to do everything we possibly can to oppose the stadium. So I'm asking each of you to appoint yourselves as a committee of one to tell everybody that votes in your family, tell everybody that votes as your next door neighbors, tell everybody that votes that you know to go to the polls on November 2nd and vote no. And if you've got the time in between that, come on out and help with these actions, because we don't have TV ad money. And we shouldn't need TV ad money to convey the truth. Right, Bex?
That's exactly right. And because we made an Instagram account and for free, it gained traction, but it's scaring Peter Trevisiani, and he's a multimillionaire with almost unlimited resources at his expense, so he can just go and take $100,000 to try and convince people to really swindle them
Exactly.
Because like Jim said, this is our tax dollars. There's a moment on the commercial where there's a man who says it's a bond, not a tax. But bonds are paid back by taxpayers with interest.
That's right.
And so he's spending money to try and make more money. And he's for this bond because it's not a risk for him. Like Jim said, the team can up and leave at any point. But we're going to be stuck with the stadium. And no matter what, the stadium will be, it functions as a tool to gentrify the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And the city doesn't mind that because they are focused on economic development. And someone like Tim Keller is focused on building his career, saying he economically revitalized the Albuquerque area and Baralas and downtown. But we know that revitalization is not for us. It's not improving the lives or the infrastructure for the existing residents. And yeah, that's why we really need to vote no and rally and fight back, and we will win.
Last point. Peter Trevisani has an estimated wealth of about 27 billion with a B dollars. $27 billion. That's what he's estimated as his worth. So he could build the stadium out of his own pocket and not even miss the money, really. But to put the city in hock, and like I said, with all the risks and all the damage that's going to be done in the process, he ought to be ashamed of himself. He really should. And throwing a few dollars around, to local organizations that he thinks he's going to curry some favor there, it just doesn't work that way. Truth will win out. And on November 2nd, we are obligated to see that truth just wins out one more time. Bex, any parting comments?
Yeah, just one more thing about the bonds. Of course, we're saying housing first, not a stadium, but it shouldn't be a bond. We shouldn't be borrowing money from banks and rich investors and having to pay them back. Who should be paying for housing, healthcare, education is the rich. So we need to tax the rich, cut the defense budget, and put that money for people first rather than paying rich investors to provide our social services and basic needs.
We got to get out and fight, folks. This is all about the future of the community and the future of Albuquerque, which is becoming a very difficult challenge, but we can rise to this challenge and make it work for us. Thanks again for coming on.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, and we'll see you out there on the line.
Until the next time, it's time to say goodbye. When you out here in the streets, keep it real, 505. We love everybody, we just want to let you know. Thanks for tuning in to that Saturday show.